Welcome to this explainer. You know, if you've ever watched an Indian romantic movie, I bet you've recognized a very familiar pattern. Boy meets girl, they fall madly in love, fate tragically pulls them apart, and then, after this long, agonizing struggle, they finally reunite. It is the absolute classic cinematic formula, right? But what if I told you there's no way this narrative blueprint was invented in some modern film studio in Mumbai or Chennai? Actually, scratch that, it wasn't invented recently at all. It was engineered thousands of years ago in an ancient Sanskrit play. Today, we're unpacking a story that has literally shaped the way we watch romance unfold on the silver screen.
Here's our roadmap. We'll start with an ancient blockbuster, break down the perfect cinematic formula, track its century on screen, explore its role as the muse for film music, and finally, look at why it's so timeless, modern, and enduring. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. An ancient blockbuster and the origins of Shakuntala.
To really understand this blockbuster, you have to imagine a protagonist who is the literal love child of a celestial nymph, Menaka, and a powerful ascetic. Because she grew up in a totally secluded forest ashram, she's the ultimate symbol of purity. She is completely unaware of how the complicated outside world works. Yet, when she's suddenly thrown into the fire of life, she shows this incredible grit that anchors the entire story. This is Shakuntala. She is the absolute heart of Abhijanana Shakuntalam, a classic Sanskrit play by the legendary poet Kalidasa. Now, to be fair, pointers to Shakuntala existed way before this play. You can find mentions of her son, Bharata, in the ancient Satapatha Brahmana, and the core story actually comes straight from the Adi Parva of the Mahabharata. But it was Kalidasa who took this fairly straightforward epic and injected it with such profound dramatic complexity, elevating it into an absolute masterpiece of world literature.
Moving to Section 2, the perfect cinematic formula, and Kalidasa as the master screenwriter.
You really have to think of Kalidasa not just as some historical poet from antiquity, but as an early pioneer of narrative structure. I mean, long before cameras were even a thing, he built a framework that screenwriters literally use as a textbook today. Just look at the narrative shift. In the original Mahabharata, the plot is pretty straightforward. But Kalidasa makes this incredible editorial choice. He introduces a massive plot twist, Sage Devasa's curse and a lost memory ring. Because of this curse, King Dushyanta completely forgets Shakuntala. And this brilliantly illustrates how the edit presents the king in a much more sympathetic light. It successfully avoids the narrative loopholes from Kalidasa's other plays, like Malavikagnimitram, where kings are basically just driven by physical attraction. It's a real game changer, just brilliant structural writing.
Section 3. A century on screen, exploring 100 years of adaptations. You see, this ancient formula didn't just sit around gathering dust on palm leaves. It has maintained a relentless grip on filmmakers across the country, acting as a massive inspiration since the very birth of cinema. Looking at the timeline, the first known version of Abhijana Shakuntalam actually hit the silver screen way back in 1920 as a silent film. Then, we get the famous Hindi adaptation in 1943. The 1960s sparked a huge regional cinema boom with versions in Malayalam, Telugu, and Assamese. And this momentum, it just kept going. In 2022, director Dushyant Srithyar released a rare Sanskrit film adaptation, and in 2023, the epic was reimagined all over again in a major Telugu theatrical release. We are talking about a continuous, unbroken evolution of one single story on screen for over a century. And one filmmaker in particular, V. Shanaram, had a fascinating, almost obsessive artistic dedication to this text. When he launched his own production company, his very first movie was Shakuntala in 1943, starring Jay Sri, who was his wife at the time. Fast forward 17 years, he remakes it as Stree in 1961, this time starring Sandhya, his second wife. His dedication was so intense that even in totally unrelated films like his 1955 movie Janak Janak Pile Baj, he just had to insert this elaborate technicolor Vishwamitra and Menaka dance sequence. He did it just to bring a dramatic visual spectacle and pay fresh homage to the epic.
Section 4. The muse for film music and the soundtrack of Longin.
So in the text, Shakuntala is basically pristine nature personified. Her total innocence colliding with these sudden, overwhelming feelings of love became the ultimate fodder for Indian film music's greatest lyricists. Just think about the dramatic challenge here. How does an innocent ashram girl write a love letter? I mean, she grew up in a holy grove, completely cut off from the complicated social dynamics of a royal court. When she falls for King Dushyanta, these feelings are entirely alien to her. How do you express an emotion you've literally never been taught to understand?
The answer to that rhetorical question gave us some of the absolute best music in cinema. Take a second to appreciate this brilliant lyric from the 1965 Malayalam film adaptation. When asked to just mimic the thought process of a popular Hindi song, the legendary lyricist Vayalar Ramavarma actually refused. Instead, he asked how a sheltered ashram girl could possibly know the intricacies of love. So he wrote, Priyatama Premalekhanam Engane Yezuranam Munikumarika Yalle, which translates to, how to write a love letter, after all, am I not a hermit girl? It hits the nail on the head, perfectly capturing her innocence. From Shailendra to Kannadasan, legendary lyricists have grappled with this exact same emotion. Honestly, without Kalidasa's narrative premise of longing, the classic Indian cinema love song as we know it might not even exist.
Finally, Section 5. Timeless, modern, and enduring, and how these ancient tropes exist in today's world. It's absolutely fascinating how these thousands of years old concepts perfectly mirror today's modern social discussions. For instance, Shakuntala and Dushyantya's union was a Gandharva Vivaha, a marriage by mutual consent without any formal rites or rituals. That is essentially the ancient equivalent of a live-in relationship. Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens next. After the king rejects her because of the curse, Shakuntala becomes a single mother, raising a valiant son entirely alone in the forest. It's a striking, incredibly powerful parallel to Sita raising love and Kush in the Ramayana.
And then we have this massive theme of male accountability. When the curse finally breaks and King Dushyanta remembers Shakuntala, he goes through this profound transformation. The guy who once treated love as just a casual royal sport completely cast his ego aside. He pines inconsolably for the woman he wronged. And when they finally reunite in the last act, this powerful king begs for her pardon and literally touches her feet in public. This deeply physical, public apology makes the drama so incredibly poignant, emotionally resonant, and honestly, surprisingly progressive for its time.
But the cultural impact of this story goes way beyond just relationships. It touches the very identity of a nation. Shakuntala's son is named Bharata. The play suggests he goes on to rule unopposed and actually lends his name to the nation of India itself, Bharat. Interestingly enough, he is just one of 4 prominent Bharatas mentioned in ancient Indian texts, alongside Lord Rama's brother, the sage who wrote the Natya Sastra, and Jada Bharata from the Bhagavatam.
And in the visual arts, the impact is just as staggering. Get this, between 8 and 9 of the legendary artist Raja Ravi Varma's famous paintings were based entirely on this single classic text by Kalidasa. That's right, long before filmmakers were framing shots of Shakuntala on camera, master painters were dedicating entire visual collections to her story. So we've traced this incredible journey from an ancient Sanskrit epic to the silent film era, through regional cinema booms, and straight into the big-budget spectacles we watch today. And it leaves us with a fascinating, provocative thought to ponder. What ancient story is secretly writing your favorite movies today? I challenge you to keep an eye out. The next time you sit down to watch a modern romantic blockbuster, look closely at those lovers uniting, separating, and fighting to find their way back to each other. You just might see Kalidasa's immortal blueprint staring right back at you. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.